At this time, we're going to modify the program a little bit. I'm going to invite all the speakers today to come up front for our panel Q&A discussion. If you could, we've got some extra chairs. Okay, everyone. What we're going to do the Q&A with the panel, and then after that we're going to wrap up. But this is your opportunity if you have any questions for the panelists to address from what you've heard today. We've taken some written questions already, but any questions from the audience to get things going? One of the questions I like to ask from the DNA agents basically is talked about the different types of heroin. In the western United States and then east Mississippi. What's the difference of that? What can you tell us?
Hello. It's basically how it's being processed. When you look at the white Colombian heroin, they go to great extents to clean out a lot of the impurities and how they acetylate it. They boil it with acetic anhydride. With the Mexican brown and the black tar, the Mexican brown, they don't do some of the filtering on it. It's otherwise very similar to the standard. With the black tar, they just sort of put everything in a pot and just let it boil, and all that junk is still in there. And a lot of that junk is super, super bad for you. It's like 100 times more carcinogenic than benzene. So people don't realize that when they're using the black tar heroin, they're putting some really, really nasty stuff in their bodies.
Also to that, the fentanyl. I know we've seen some fentanyl here in Jackson, but it seems like it's laced with the heroin. Do you think that's going to increase in the future, the fentanyl?
It's hard to say at this point. We are seeing more samples that are being submitted to our lab that have fentanyl in it. It's difficult for us to really look at it without knowing what's happening on the back end, where it's being produced, how much it's being mixed, at what stage it's being mixed. It appears it might be more profitable to do fentanyl. We've actually had people who had thought they were buying heroin that was all fentanyl. Now, it's been cut significantly. Just as an example, pharmaceutical grade fentanyl, when it's coming out of a big pharmacy, it's generally at 7% purity, and that's still too strong for most regular prescription drugs. So the fentanyl that's being sold as heroin on the street is cut significantly. It's mostly a cutting agent. But until we can actually determine who's producing it, where it's being mixed in, it's really just hard to say. It's difficult. I think, again, it is profitable. You're less exposed as a drug trafficking organization when you're making regular heroin. You have your growers, you have your lab operators, you have your distribution. You're dealing with large bulk quantities. When you're dealing with fentanyl, you have a small handful of fairly well-trained lab operators. You have a much smaller quantity that you need to smuggle across the border, and then once it's in the States, you can cut it and make a huge number of street-level dosages. So it does lower the visibility of the organization and the risk to them.
Great, thank you. This is a question for Chris. You could hand the microphone down to Chris, please. Chris, I've got a question that came in. Basically, first, what made you start using, and then secondly, what made you stop or turn around?
What made me start using? I don't know. I guess something that one of my counselors said to me that made a lot of sense was that there's, tons of reasons why people start using or why people use drugs, but it all basically boils down to changing the way that you feel. And I think that maybe that was it, that, you know, I wanted to have fun, or that I wanted to, you know, not feel a certain emotion. At that point in time, I don't really know what emotion it was. I had been in trouble for drinking on 2 separate occasions, um, and been, you know, arrested and had MIPs, so I was on probation. And but I was still going to college, and you know, I wasn't going to stop going to college parties, so I would take Vicodins instead, you know, because you couldn't fail a breathalyzer for taking Vicodins. And then incrementally, you know, I just kept giving in and until you know, I was taking more and more Vicodins, and then oxycodone, and then Oxycontin and morphine. And what made me stop was, to be honest, I really have no idea. I know what helped me stop, but you know, I tried to stop probably 100 different times, you know, from the time that I was 22 and the first time I went to rehab until I was 26. But I finally stopped the last time, you know, kind of by chance. You know, I got in trouble with the law, and turning in, before that happened, I turned in my drug dealer, because every time I would get out of rehab, he'd be standing there with, you know, a handful of dope. Whether I don't have any money, well, just take it and pay me back, you know. Or if I didn't call him, you know, he'd be calling me. So, you know, I just couldn't stop with him on the street, and he didn't belong on the street anyway. So.
Thank you. This is a question for Mr. Geldof. You pass the microphone down. You mentioned about the prescription drug abuse you saw in West Virginia, Kentucky. Did you have any opinion as to, you know, why there was that kind of use going on down there?
I think it's similar to Kentucky and eastern Ohio. It's old mill towns, it's Appalachia. A lot of it is people feel desperate. There's really not a lot of hope out there. And in addition, it really is the sale of it is used, it's an economy down there. And I mean, we have sales of from companies to small towns of less than 500 people, 4 million pills in a couple-year period of time. So I think it's just, you know, and I'm asked that question about Detroit a lot too, because Detroit has had such a pill problem. I don't know if it's related to the automobile industry. A lot of people, you know, manual labor, hard work, and maybe, you know, they get involved with injuries, and that kind of, it almost becomes a family tradition type of thing. But I would say pretty much that just people are just really, you know, they're desperate down there. There's not a lot of hope, and I think it just becomes part of the economy. So.
Thank you. Next question we've got, it goes down to Mr. Damaris at the end. Education. This is really a question about how or why how are we educating kids in our school systems about addiction, and not just about speakers, but the questionnaire has something about, do we have a class concerning that?
Gotcha. Well, you say, why are we educating? And the stat that stood out to me was 2 out of 3 families have been affected by addiction, and I can list how ways that I have, and I know what these students are going through. I know Michigan Center is not the highest socioeconomic status, and there are some issues, and we hear them. Kids, like I said, they want to be heard, and a lot of times they go to the teachers or whatnot. So why? Because a lot of people have been affected. Maybe not directly, but indirectly. In the how part, there's not necessarily a class for it. We're trying to just do the supplemental things. We're lucky to have that advisory period that Lisa was talking about, where we can educate outside the realm of your core classes. So I think it's extremely important, because these people are affected. You know, and I see Chris here, and I coached against Chris. Okay, and at the time, I never would have thought that, right? I'm like, oh, he's a star basketball player. He's a great kid, right? Very, very nice on the court, things like that. And it's not necessarily your stereotypical person who you would think has these issues, that everybody can be affected.
Well, you're also a teacher, not only a coach. I mean, what's your perception from your level?
Of the serious, or
Well,
the,
from what you see, you're basically your boots on the ground in that environment. I mean, how are you seeing?
my honest opinion is I think alcohol and marijuana are pretty big issues. I don't hear too much about the more serious things that we're talking about up here. I mean, you talk to kids whose parents are alcoholics. I've got kids that they provide and take care of the family at 15 years old, and it's really sad to hear about. You know, so that's you hear it. I don't have any numbers for you, but you hear kids talk about it, and it's scary.
And we also have another question, Matt. Basically says the experience that you had at your drug summit was incredible. Is your school district putting on any drug education at the lower grade levels?
Well, the building I teach at is a 7 through 12 building. We decided that through the seriousness of the presenters and speakers that we had at our drug summit last year, we did not include the 7th and 8th grade. It was a 9 through 12 because of the severity of the issues. I think Scott would be better to speak on that. And Steve, yeah.
All of our teachers that do the health training throughout the district are training the Michigan model, and there is a drug unit within that. And Steve does a lot with most teens don't across the county. So the lower grades, we try to talk about more of the effect on the body versus the impact that we talk about at, like Matt was saying, at the 9th and 12th grade levels. But we try to do that, and it's the Michigan model curriculum that we use. Steve, do you want to follow up on that?
So at the countywide level, kindergarten through 6th grade, really through 5th grade, we have a comprehensive health curriculum. We've trained elementary teachers throughout the county over the last 5 years in this curriculum. It's the state's model curriculum, and it has a unit on alcohol and other drugs. Starting in 6th grade, we have an excellent program taught by Shelley Milligan. And Shelley, where are you? Are you still here? She had to leave. So Shelley teaches at different grade levels in our local schools and does a pretty significant series of presentations with our youth. And she's an outstanding instructor. Her program has been evaluated. It's been shown that kids have increased knowledge. They have changed attitudes about substance abuse prevention. And so we know that the presentations do get through. At high school level, we have required health education, and substance abuse prevention is a part of that education. So it's really not just about kids knowing. Okay, it's one thing to give them the information, but it's also about critical thinking. And what we need to create is a culture where substances are not preferred, that we're encouraging kids in growth in many other areas. And here's one of the greatest things. If students are healthy overall and they're successful in school, they have less of a reason to use drugs. So it's not just about teaching them. Education is powerful, but it's also about teaching to the whole child and helping them to be healthy so they make healthier decisions.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, we have another question. Chris, as a high school teacher for 20 years, I find students often feel lost or missing something in their life when they start heroin. Was that true for you?
I didn't start heroin as a high school student until I was 22 years old, but I started prescriptions in high school. When it first started getting serious for me, I did kind of go through like a little bit of a loss. The girl that I dated my senior year of high school, the whole year, was the foreign exchange student from Brazil, and the summer after my senior year, like a little bit after my graduation party, she had to go back to Brazil. So that kind of, hurt for a while. And I did numb the pain with Vicodins at that point. But even then it wasn't a serious level because when I, got over that, I didn't keep using. But I don't know, basketball pretty much filled up my entire life. I had every opportunity to play college basketball. I had a lot going for me. I had a good family. My niece had just been born, my only niece or nephew. So I can't say that it did. I'm more or less, as addicts, when we feel good, we want to feel really good, and to go back to what the doctor was talking about earlier with the dopamine levels, naturally your dopamine levels can increase, but, you want to feel really good. And I can remember, doing that and going and doing fun things, but wanting to have more fun with it, so I would take pills too. When everybody else that I was with, my friends, they were just sober, having a great time, but I had to, take it to another level, and swallow a handful of pills. I can remember going ice fishing. I wouldn't go if I didn't have a handful of Vicodins to take. I can remember specifically saying, no, I'm not going to go, because at the time I didn't have any pills. So, but I can't say that I was missing anything, but I agree that a lot of times students are missing something, and they either want to numb pain or they want to change the way they feel because of that reason. So.
Thanks, Chris. And this is for the whole panel. I want to start with Matt at the end, the microphone. The question is this: what can be done to better fund and increase prevention services, education, and support for youth and adults?
I don't think I could touch on the funding part, but talking about the education piece, is awareness, and I think for high school students especially, what to do if they have an issue. If they have an issue or they have a friend with an issue. Because a lot of times they'll say, hey, my friend's smoking every night at home. All right, they don't know what to do about it, right? So I think the education piece is the resources. And in the folders are the lists of Jackson community organizations and resources. And before we started this process, I was kind of oblivious to some of that. But there are so many awesome organizations that are able to offer help. So the education is what to do. Okay, what to do if I have a friend, a parent, somebody that needs help, I think, is the education piece.
Thanks.
Well, as far as the funding goes, obviously I'm from the private sector. So all the money for Andy's Angels is donations from great people in Jackson County. We have lots of businesses that help us on a yearly basis. So as far, I can't really speak about the public funding, but I can say there's certain areas, especially in the school districts. How many kids do you lose to the dropouts? How many kids do you lose to drop out of school because they're hooked on drugs, because drugs have taken over their life, because they're tired of school because they can't stay in school because of drugs? How much money are you losing in each one of those school districts because of that? Look at that number. There's money that's already there. You have that money, but you're losing it because you don't have a program going on within your school to keep the kids in school and to keep the kids off the dope.
I have no idea. I couldn't speak to funding. If I know anything about raising funds, I'd pay myself to go around and speak. So I don't have no idea.
I think it's a really complex question because I do think that the new healthcare era, we are starting to see how complex it is. And if we're going to move in a different direction, there are payers, there are insurances that are now incentivizing, doctors to do the right thing, to do wellness and prevention pushes, and then also treatment, such as myself, one of the areas that we've had a weakness is demonstrating outcomes. You know, what is success? I mean, people think, well, we should get everybody clean the very first time, and that's success, and you guys are obviously failing. And that's not really, you know, there are different measures of success, but Blue Cross Blue Shield is, you know, saying you need to demonstrate best practice strategies, and we will incentivize you financially to show outcomes. I mean, so that's kind of a big picture thing. I like the idea what Dr. Waller said about the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, think about it with tobacco companies. Don't we get some PA $2 that they're required? I'm looking over at Raven. I think that they give us some monies to help with educating and doing prevention efforts to communities. If you're making money off of chemicals, and sometimes people have problems with those chemicals, you know, can we not have some kickback? I don't know how else to put that. It's creative.
I have not approached this, the funding yet. Maybe I'll come back after I get my master's degree. I know how a Home of New Vision helps people that don't have incomes. We offer free services, case management and peer support.
That's one thing I was going to say is that finances should not be a barrier, at least to getting treatment services in this community. We have a great relationship with our Mid-State Health Network region. So not just the Medicaid, Healthy Michigan plan, but the people who are indigent, we are able to, if they don't have any kind of funding and they meet qualifications, we can readily get money to get them services. They've done a wonderful job, so that should not be a reason.
I would say, in my experience here, especially in working internationally and working domestically, but especially here in Michigan the last 4.5 years, is working together. There's nothing more fulfilling and reaching the goals is working together. And that does include therapists, counselors, teachers, recovering addicts, and taking away the stigma of that, because people need to be able to come out of the shadows and talk about it. You know, as DEA, we don't deal with the personal use amount individuals. And we deal with the dealers, the distributors, the manufacturers. And being able to talk to people like Chris, that I've been able to do the last couple of years, has helped me look at my job differently. It's helped me be able to put more emphasis even later in our careers, that it is important what we're doing, because you look at the effect. You look at the effect what it has in a community, you look at the effect of a family. But being able to live in Mexico and in Colombia, I looked at the effect it had on a total country, where Mexico was upside down, and Colombia was upside down in the 90s, being controlled by drug traffickers. And you can see in Flint and Pontiac and Detroit and some parts of western Chicago and southern Chicago, you can see areas that have just been disseminated and torn down and never going to come back because of drugs. And so when we see issues like, let's make marijuana legal, the interesting question I'd like to have for Matt at the end is, are these kids saying that marijuana is addictive? Because I believe it is, but you're getting mixed messages out there saying it's not. And then you want to put marijuana in the thing, and it does have these unintended consequences of the dropout rates, of then you get into burglaries, you get into car thefts, you get into vandalisms, you get into shoplifting. We just followed a crew for days from Lansing, and they were going in with bags, stealing up to $10,000 of clothes from the malls in Novi and Somerset and Oakland County to go back to Lansing to sell it to buy dope. But the unintended consequences of that is then everybody pretty much is selling more for paying more for clothes because people are stealing to get their dope. Funding, there's a heroin initiative that I need to talk to Jerry about that we can get, through the government to help the specific county, Jackson County, through a heroin initiative, and we'd be more than happy to help with that. But working together, everybody from the top to the top, from the federals, the state, the locals, lawyers, regulation, teachers, counselors, therapists, that's the way to get it done. And it has to be more on a regular basis, because we can all have a meeting, and I would have a meeting in Mexico, and I think of everything, we're going to change the world, we're going to change Mexico. We wouldn't have another meeting for 2 years, and then the topic would change to something else. But it's extremely important to get together and get everybody's side of, because everybody has a different vision and a different understanding of what's going on. I really didn't understand the drug problem until I left Chicago. When I thought I seized 10 keys of coke, I thought I was making a huge dent. When I got to Mexico and saw 23 tons in a warehouse, I realized the problem's a lot bigger than I'm going to handle.
Well, I'm not qualified to talk about funding for education or treatment, but I'll just comment that, when we do enforcement actions, we're always trying to, pass along our costs of doing business to the bad guys. And under like the Medicaid False Claims Act, we can get treble damages or 3 times the damages to the Medicaid program. And so that first single damage figure is to make the Medicaid program whole for the fraud that providers may engage in. And then the excess, the penalty, can be applied to the costs that we are to you as taxpayers. And so we always try and take care of our enforcement costs through passing that on to the offenders.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with Dave, and also I'm not a money guy myself, but one word that I hear is collaboration when we're sitting and analyzing this issue. And I just look here in this corner, we have the federal government, state government regulation, and there's historically kind of been this trend for everybody to stay in their lane. I stay in my lane with my budget, and Dave stays in his, and he stays in his, and we all do our thing kind of on an island. But if we take, if there's 10, 15, $20 million between us, working collaboratively and using that $20 million for its full benefit, rather than me using my 5 and so on, whatever those numbers may be, doesn't net the same result. Similar to Dave and I have had this conversation in years past. Sometimes Dave's predecessor or somebody else might have a criminal case that he's working, so my predecessor or someone else sort of sits on the sidelines and waits while he does his thing and does his case. Well, now we're making an effort to work together on that. Okay, Dave, you got a good criminal case going against this person or that person. Let me do what I can do right now to get him off the street while you're working up your case. And maybe that helps somebody else's son or daughter or whatever with that early move. And he could sweep in and take action that at the very end may be far more significant for that offender, but for the person who's obtaining prescriptions from that offender, if I can come in and say, okay, you can't do that anymore, that's value. I don't know if that's a dollars and cents value, but that's something that we could do from a collaboration perspective.
Thank you. And this is a question directed to the DEA. Can you speak to the impact of medical marijuana and theories of it being a gateway drug?
Since I'm retiring in 3 weeks, by the time the OPR investigation starts, I'll be gone. I'm just going to make one comment on it, and it kind of pertains to one of the issues of prescription drugs. My own personal opinion of medical marijuana, it's kind of like jury nullification on a statewide basis. I mean, and that's fine if people want to do that. The state voted. But here's my issue. When you call it medicine, that you better be prepared when you find a joint in your 12-year-old's closet and he says to you, well, it's medicine, you better have an answer for it. Because I really believe one of the biggest issues we have with prescription drug abuse, and it's been touched on by everybody here, is that it's not that bad. Okay, it's legally made, it's medicine, it's really not that bad. And I really believe there was a advertisement a few years ago where they're bringing 2 bodies out of the coroner's office, and they said one died from overdose of legitimate medicine or medical or illicit drugs. The other one died from the abuse of prescription drugs. Which one's more dead? And I really believe that really is the crux of it. And I really feel that the medical marijuana thing, we're going to pay for that down the road. Again, my own opinion. I'm not going to get into the medical efficacy of it. I'm not a physician. I have my own opinion about that, but we just have to. I would say this, college must be a very painful place to be because pretty much these kids all got their cards. So anyway, it's another story.
I'd like to comment a little bit. Our acting administrator Rosenberg was quoted a while back about the medical marijuana situation. And sadly, the media kind of left out the reason why he said that. When you're talking about medical marijuana, you're basically talking about the entire plant. And the point he brought up, and just as an example, nicotine is a drug, but tobacco is not a drug. In the same light, THC is a drug, but marijuana is not a drug. THC is actually available in prescription form. It has been for quite a long time. So that was the point he made, but unfortunately, it didn't get the press coverage as his comments did. And that's a legitimate point. If you want it to be a drug or used for medicine, if it has to be approved by FDA, you have to isolate the specific chemical, you have to be able to assure dosages, and you just can't do that with a leaf that you're burning, inhaling all these other compounds. And that's the point he was trying to make with that.
Thank you. This is another question for Chris. Thanks. Chris, what resources helped initially in your recovery when you left the structured recovery treatment programs?
Always when when I went to rehab, I wouldn't just get out the next day and start using. I don't think I ever did that out of the 4 times that I went. But there was the times that I was successful, as in, I stayed clean for maybe 6 months or 8 months afterwards, was when I would do outpatient rehab. Immediately after I left inpatient rehab, the next day I was there from 8 to 5, like Melissa mentioned in one of the programs. And then another time, I didn't even go to inpatient rehab. I just went to Allegiance Substance Abuse Services and did their Monday, Wednesday, Friday outpatient or intensive outpatient rehab that was from 2 to 5. And the counselors there, I never learned more. I literally probably could go to college and test out of the majority of addiction classes because I stayed there for at least over a year and learned so much from them. But I would say outpatient rehab, and then for me it was AA meetings as opposed to NA meetings. Going to AA meetings mainly because there was one right down the road from my work, Al Cameron, and it had a lot of older gentlemen and women that had a lot of sobriety, as opposed to sometimes in NA you get a lot of newcomers, that only have a couple months of sobriety or something like that are struggling the same way you are, and they don't have anybody to look up to or to ask, questions what it's like when you get to, 9 months sober, a year sober, or 2 years sober, and things start to look better. But I would say get a support group, talk to your family and tell them exactly, the behaviors that, if you start finding cut up straws around, then I'm snorting dope. Or if I start falling asleep standing up, I'm snorting dope, and telling them, the warning signs and things like that. But definitely outpatient rehab, a support group, finding a higher power for me is a huge thing. And, staying focused, basically.
Thank you, Chris. And this is a question for DEA or the AG, or both. You can hand the microphone down. Thank you. Question is this. Are there any stats on how many physicians are prescribing opioids?
I don't have any stats on that. I mean, we've got, I'm trying to think, do you guys know how many, you probably have the number of registrants you have in the state. I don't know it offhand. I can tell you there's about 1,000 Suboxone physicians as far as treatment currently in the state. That I can tell you. I don't have the number of physicians. Any physician, pretty much any doctor that has a state number and will have a DEA number in order to prescribe controlled drugs. So pretty much any physician out there can prescribe, and you know, I don't have a stats on how many are actually prescribing.
I would just say that none of us here know the number, but that's a discoverable number that would be able to be pulled out of the MAP system, because any prescription of a controlled substance written or dispensed from a pharmacy would be in the system. So you could actually, Tom's client, Lara, could run a report that would list all the physicians who had prescribed a Schedule II, for example, in 2014. We just don't have that data, but the state of Michigan would have the raw data.
All right, thank you. And the follow-up question to that is, for both DEA or AG, is it truly widespread, or is it more a few bad apple prescribing doctors ruining the bunch?
Well, since I have the microphone, I'll take the first shot. The criminal actors are definitely a few bad apples. You have a vast majority of practitioners who are scrupulous and are in it for the right reasons. There's a middle group that's really hard to quantify for me, that is not going about it with evil intentions, but is untrained and you know, unintentionally ignorant about their contribution to the problem. And that's sort of the tricky area that the education piece of this puzzle needs to fix, in the training. The criminal targets that a lot of us focus on, in my view, are very few.
I would agree with that completely. The only thing I would, add to that, which I think is obvious and everybody knows, is that every community has a bad actor, and every community has people who are predisposed to that. So it's widespread in that context. So there are people who want it, and there are people who can get it in every single community. So it's widespread in that context.
Thank you. Then the question here is basically this. If you had a magic wand and you're looking at Jackson County based on why you're here as a panelist, expertise, what would you like to see happen if you could to help this community, Jackson, with its prescription drug abuse and heroin problem?
I'd go back to collaboration. I think that's important. Dave and I struggle with that. I mentioned in my presentation the privacy concerns with respect to information that I have the ability to pull from maps, but don't necessarily have the ability to share with law enforcement because of the way certain state laws are written, the way certain federal laws are written. So I think a certain openness to that is also mindful of individual privacy is important. And I'd like to have millions upon millions of dollars to do it. I mean, that's always the big thing.
Yeah, I would just say MAPS reform, and that's not something that would be unique, of course, to Jackson County, but it would benefit the entire state. This is, I think, my confidence is pretty high. This is in progress. I would love to see the state of Michigan duplicate what Ohio has done. And since it's within Jim's reach, and he may be able to vouch for the differences, that a modernized system with new laws making use of this system required for certain prescribers in certain circumstances will really, I think, tamp down the sort of off-the-chart numbers that we've seen here in Michigan. MAPS was state-of-the-art when it was produced, but it's time for modernization of that.
In regard to the MAPS program, if you care to educate yourself about that or truly see who has the best of what, because there are several good things in different states, if you go to Brandeis University's website, they actually have a Center for Excellence for a prescription drug monitoring program. So it's kind of a central location where you can locate all of that. I agree, Ohio has a very good program, but there are a couple of other states, Oklahoma, New York come to mind, that have a couple of pieces, a couple of nuances that I'd like to see dumped into just one great program that I think Michigan could do under the right circumstances.
Just as an immediate effect, I think the one thing would be the use of the Narcan with your emergency runs. I think that's a huge deal. Absolutely supported by DEA. I was speaking to the special agent in charge a couple, 2-3 weeks ago, and I won't give you the exact town, but it was in Ohio, and I couldn't believe it when he told me, and I had to ask him twice, and he said that was the number. There was like 2,000 runs in a year in a county for where they actually used the Narcan. I mean, and that's huge. I mean, I understand it's not a long-term solution, but you can't get somebody in rehab if they're not among the living. So as far as it having a pretty dramatic effect initially, I think that's one thing I'd love to see. And I think we are seeing it. So.
I am really sorry, but I don't remember the question. And Melissa next to me said if I had a magic wand. My magic wand would be that the things that we did in our addiction wouldn't be held against us when we try to invest in our future. I have a drug-related offense. I have a felony for manufacturing and delivering crack cocaine because I would do anything to get my drug. And that makes me jump through hoops and potentially make me never be able to work in places that I would love to work at, and I know that I can make a difference. I would love for everybody to have naloxone on hand if somebody is overdosing. And that actually is starting to come true. There's actually a training on December 28th in Ann Arbor. If you look on Facebook on Home of New Vision's website, it's a free training, and you go home with the naloxone to use if you need to.
Wow, my mind just went a ton of different places, other than healing and peace and centeredness, for everyone, so that we don't seek a spiritual experience through drugs. We're able to have a core and feel comfortable in our own skin, But that's kind of pie in the sky. I'm thinking, in my field, one of the things I really would like to see have happen, and I think we're moving in that direction, is that clinicians, they're actually physicians in the ER and primary care physicians get educated in screening and brief screening and intervention strategies. So they have a tremendous ability in a short period of time to make an impact. When somebody's coming into the ER because they've had a major accident that was related to their addiction, that is a moment, that is a teachable moment. And I think that the physicians don't feel like they have the skills, but they do. They just need to feel comfortable in how to have those dialogues and how to do motivational enhancement strategies targeted in those moments. So I would definitely like that. And I also would like for how the language people use to talk about addicts. And I'm going to say probation officers. I'm going to say therapists. I'm going to say, I have talked to a nurse at my location when, I had an email about what are we going to do about these toxic patients. And I said, we are not going to use the term toxic in regard to our patients. We're not. When you start seeing someone as toxic, how you view them, how you interact with them, how effective you are with them it's not going to be optimal. We have sick people, we have people who have challenges, we have people with barriers and needs and stuff, but they are not toxic. So I would want that to kind of spread across the community.
If I had a magic wand, I'd probably ask for a supply of unlimited good-looking single women. But that's if I had a magic wand. I'm asking for more than one thing. But no, I wish that the silence would break and people would have the courage to turn in drug dealers. I know it's a difficult thing to do, and I wish the stigma of snitching and tattletaling, or would leave, and we would just live by the laws that the police and legislators have made, and do the right thing. Whether you become a snitch, or if you're not in the mafia and you're not in the mob or a gang, you're not a snitch. Last I checked, and then I don't have to hear about people's sons dying and daughters dying anymore. If we can put drug dealers, obviously we're never going to put them all, but if I got that magic wand, we're putting them all behind bars. So, thanks.
As long as we're going to have the wand out, I can tell you. Actually, first, I wanted to make a comment. I don't know if the gentleman's still here, but he's from Walgreens. He's a pharmacist. He had to leave? I want to tell you about what Walgreens, and we're talking about the mapping program, and they were talking about it down at voluntary program. I want you to know Walgreens, it's mandatory for their employees to use that. They didn't need legislation. They didn't need laws. They took a little common sense, and they said, hey, we're going to do this, and we're not going to be required to do it. We're doing it because we want to do it and because we think it's important. So I think we'll give a shout out to Walgreens on that. That's right. But going back to the magic wand part of this whole program, I'd get Governor Snyder to give me that piece of property where Cassidy Lake Prison is on right now in Waterloo Township, and I'd build the most beautiful, sober living community you could possibly find. We'd get these kids out of jail. We'd get them in a clean environment. We'd get them in an environment where they can support each other, and then within 10 years, I would make that facility self-sufficient.
You got a lot of power. That's great.
I had the wand.
I know. Through Mr. Jarzinka and the work with the drug summits is bringing great awareness to the community. And I know everyone here is going to take it back to their organizations, just like we did at Michigan Center. So that awareness piece that it is a problem, and that's really been my eye-opening experience through this of how big a problem it is. And now I see it on MLive, and I see it all the time. And I had a former student, I think last week, die because of his addiction. And I have former students that Mike works with through Andy's Angels. And it was eye-opening. And I don't know if everybody has seen that yet. So the awareness piece, I think, of that it is, what a problem it is, which I thank you for doing all this and bringing that to my forefront, but also throughout the awareness of all the awesome resources here in Jackson, that we get out there and we publicize and we hype you up, and we help you help other people too.
Thank you. Let's give the panel a round of applause, please. Great job, and thank you, panel. We're just going to wrap up here.
Can I ask a question, Jerry?
Yes.
Just one real
Yeah,
quick.
sure.
How
Yeah.
come, this might be for David, we can't make heroin like cyanide, treat it the same way? In regards to it being like a poison. No, not make it like that so it kills people. I'm saying treat it the same way. From a law enforcement standpoint.
Yeah, it already is. It's a schedule. There's no legitimate purpose. You can't, it's contraband.
Right. Okay. Cool.
All right.
That's it.
Very good, thank you. I just want to make a few comments here. I want to again thank everyone for coming today. I want to thank all our speakers, make up this panel. Thank all our sponsors. Thank Jackson College, Dr. Dan Phelan. Thank all of you for coming. Just a reminder, this program is great, but really it wouldn't go too far if we didn't take a plan of action. And we've done this past year, but going into 2016, we're going to have quarterly meetings in the different areas. It's going to start January 21st. It's the third Thursday of the month. We're going to have April and July and October meetings. The date or the locations to be announced, but it's going to be in the afternoon. I invite all of you to participate. Check the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office Facebook page. We'll post that before the end of the month so you know where it's going to be held, when, and you certainly can contact us if you have any questions about those meetings, but we want you involved, we want your ideas. We want to keep going because as a community, we can address this issue and make a difference. One person can make a difference, but a group of ones can make a huge difference. So again, and finally, in your packet, there should be an evaluation form. I ask if you haven't done so already, please look at it, fill it out, give it back to us. We are going to do another summit next year. We'd enjoy your feedback. So thank you, everybody. Bye.